Do you feel in control of your phone use? Or does it sometimes feel like it's in control of you? Have you ever wondered how much of your daily stress and anxiety is linked to your phone and that feeling of constant connectivity? How different would your life be if you made the intentional choice to unplug? I have broken a lot of addictions in my life, but man, phone usage is a whole other beast, especially if you're someone like me who also works on your phone. I thought food would be the hardest addiction to break because you can't just go cold turkey. You have to moderate, which is hard to do. But at least food isn't pinging me with that sweet sound of dopamine likes and social validation. Sometimes I wish I could be the type of person who's just blissfully ignorant about my vices, but I'm cursed with knowing the list of harmful side effects. Anxiety, stress, attention and focus issues, increased depression, sleep disorders, eye strain, even things like decreased empathy, impulsivity, procrastination, social isolation. The list goes on. The problem is, so many of these devices or apps to help you decrease screen time just feel so all or nothing, or they're too easy to get around. And then ultimately the change just isn't sustainable. Well, that's why I'm really excited about the approach I learned in this episode. Instead of just cutting off tech or decreasing our Instagram usage to 30 minutes a day, Hannah Brencher suggests a challenge of 1,000 hours completely tech-free. And what I love about this method is that it alone gives you that sweet hit of dopamine, but towards something more positive. Those of you who love to-do lists just know the joy of checking off a task each day. But there's more to it than this, and we're going to talk about how. So, Hannah Brencher is a writer and a mom with a continual quest to be more present in life. She's also the author of The Unplugged Hours, Cultivating a Life of Presence in a Digitally Connected World. So 3 key things we will learn are the hidden impacts of constant online exposure, simple yet powerful ways to reclaim your focus and purpose, and how to change how you connect to others. Let me ask you something. How much time did you spend last week thinking about what to eat? Planning meals, making grocery lists, wandering around the store like a lost tourist. I used to waste entire Sunday afternoons on this, and it was exhausting. Then I found Hungry Root. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized picks and plans your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. They have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most are ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm actually headed to Michigan this week, and I had my Hungry Root order delivered there. So I already know that I have meals ready and plenty of snacks for the kids without scrambling to find a grocery store. It's just handled. And what I love most is their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements just for me. So no more buying spinach that rots in my fridge. They screen out over 200 additives and only source high quality ingredients. The time I've gotten back has just been life-changing. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, workplace stress is killing us. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. I used to think I could just push through everything, work harder, sleep less, pretend I had it all figured out. But that approach nearly broke me. I am all about following your joy. If that voice in your head is telling you to make a change, listen to it. Maybe you are ready to quit your job. Maybe you do need to flip your whole life upside down. But either way, you need support and tools to navigate it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, how to manage anxiety before it spirals, how to make big moves from a place of strength instead of desperation. And BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists and has helped 5 million people worldwide. And you can talk to someone from your couch. No waiting rooms, no awkward scheduling. Therapy gives you the clarity on whether that voice telling you to make a change is your intuition or just the Sunday scaries. But either way, you deserve support. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove.
A tip that I would say is like, if you're turning your phone off, take a moment to think about the thing that you want to set out to do or accomplish. And when you finish that thing, go ahead and turn your phone back on. It will all be there. It will all be waiting for you, but something will have shifted and be a little bit different about you because you did that thing you said you wanted to do, whether that was like cooking a meal undistracted or having dinner at the table or an unplugged date night, and then go back to your phone. No one's saying that the phone is wrong or that it's bad. It's just that we need to take our time and reallocate it to better places.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So what inspired you to start the 1,000 Unplugged Hours Challenge?
So I started unplugging. It was on my birthday that this challenge came into formation, a little bit unexpectedly. I tend to treat my birthday kind of like a second New Year, where you're like, oh, what are the things that I can do or get done over this next year of life? And I remember sitting in this quiet space, trying to dream up like what I wanted to do for the next year. And I felt this really strong nudge in my spirit to turn off my phone. And it wasn't like a turn off your phone once and reap all the benefits. It really felt like you need to turn your phone off and keep turning your phone off. And so me being like a planner, knowing that you can't really manage what you don't measure, I built a challenge for myself of 1,000 unplugged hours in 1 year. I really wanted to see if I could strike a balance with my phone. I think right now, the way that we're having conversations is very much like an all or nothing approach. Like we're either going to have flip phones or we're just going to continue being totally connected and exhausted, And I was like, is there a way that I can find a balance? And now, thousands of hours later, I can confidently say, like, yes, there is a balance to be struck. But you have to get to the point where you're like, okay, I want to change something for myself. I'm tired of living this connected.
I love this approach, and it feels approach is the right word because it feels actually approachable. Yeah. I have gone up and down with my screen time, just my usage. And at certain times I've made some really big changes. Like an entire month, I was only on my phone around 30 to 45 minutes a day. I felt better than ever. But then I have a business to run and it's really difficult. And it was easy at that time because I would just be like, well, can I do this on my computer instead? And I'd move to my computer. So it wasn't necessarily screen time, but I find that I'm a lot more mindful on my computer. But now that I have kids, I'm not near my computer at certain times. And so if something needs to get done, I'm on my phone, and I use my phone for so much. I use the Kindle. I use all sorts of things. I put on little podcasts and things like that when I'm like cooking dinner. And so I've just found it really difficult to figure out what that balance looks like. And I end up giving up quite a bit. And so this idea of tracking, it's like tracking your wins, tracking how much it's off rather than, I've tried everything really, like even the mindful apps that block certain things. And then at a certain point, I get so used to dismissing it that it's
right. Yeah. And the irony is that it's on your phone. It's like, okay, I'm trying to stay off my phone, but I need an app that is on my phone, which kind of defeats the purpose. No. And like, I noticed for myself because, like over the years, I tried other kinds of boundaries and like, you try to put the limitations on screen time. But what I noticed about screen time, and I don't know if this is like just me or like other people feel this, but like, I always felt screen time was like so shame inducing. Like it never made me feel good. Even if it was like, hey, you spent X amount less time on your phone this week. I still just was like, I don't feel like this is a very good metric, especially because like you use your GPS, that comes up as screen time. You listen to a podcast, that comes up as screen time. And so for me, the shift was more so I'm not telling myself I have to get rid of this because I can't because of my business, but can I add something into my life? And the thing that I added was the unplugged time. And what was crazy was that the more that I did it, the more I intentionally unplugged, the less I wanted my phone or what was on my phone, or the less I would reach for it in a time of boredom or stress or overwhelm. But it was like adding rather than taking away.
I love that. I even interviewed the light phone guy, and then I got
Oh,
one
yeah.
and I opened it up and I kind of panicked. I was like, I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I can't just switch to this brick phone. I don't understand. Like, how am I going to get the photos over? And I'm sure I could have researched, but I had so much resistance to it. So I'm curious, how do you define unplugged, and what did that structure look like for you? Because I could almost imagine cheating and I'm like, oh, I'll just unplug during my whole workday when I'm on my computer and don't need my phone.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that every person has to define the unplugged hours for themselves. I think that's number one is like, what it means for you to be unplugged. And that might look a little different for me, but I think the biggest thing is like, where is my attention being placed? And so for me, unplugged looks like being phone free. It looks like being internet free, scroll free. So mine is like a pretty aggressive approach, I guess you could say. I don't count listening to podcasts. I don't count watching shows. Unplugged is like very much like off of tech completely for me. But there are also times where like I will be sitting and the only place that I'll be is like in a Word document getting writing done. And I would consider that unplugged because I sometimes just like write on my computer. That's a convenient way to do things, right? But my focus and my attention is on a single task. And so that's where I think the attention component is very critical. And I think honestly, like it's asking yourself the question consistently, okay, am I using this tech to check in or am I using it to check out? And that was the biggest benchmark for me. And so like if I was cooking a meal or I was doing something and I needed to have a podcast playing in the background, my question would be like, okay, why is it that I can't just be alone with my thoughts? Why can't I just dismiss the noise and allow myself like a second to like breathe? And so I think it's different for each person, but for me, generally, like unplugged means pretty tech free. And if I can't turn my phone off completely because like my daughter's in school, I can put it in a box. I can put it away with the ringer on. And that kind of gets rid of that excuse of like, oh, somebody might need me. I can't unplug. Because for me, I used that as an excuse for a while as to why I was not reclaiming some of my time, some of my focus, some of my attention.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you first started unplugging? And then how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge is just it feels really uncomfortable because it is. And I think that's because we've become like programmed and wired to always have something to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that the thing that we're doing is like the most productive thing in the world, but when we have these devices in our hands, like there's always something to check. There's always another thing that we can click into. And I had to accept that discomfort and face that resistance and understand that a lot of times resistance is not a bad thing. It probably means that you're actually like headed towards a breakthrough, which is what I experienced in my own story. And so I would say like for anybody that's like wanting to unplug or starting to unplug, the hardest part is probably when you turn off the phone and you're like, now what do I do? Like, what do I do with myself? And that's the reason why a lot of people will just go ahead and turn their phones right back on. And so a tip that I would say is like, if you're turning your phone off, take a moment to think about the thing that you want to set out to do or accomplish. And when you finish that thing, go ahead and turn your phone back on. It will all be there. It will all be waiting for you, but something will have shifted and be a little bit different about you because you did that thing you said you wanted to do, whether that was like cooking a meal undistracted or having dinner at the table or an unplugged date night or, man, I've wanted to read for so long, but I can never focus long enough to read. It's like, well, what would it look like to turn off your phone and just read one chapter or two and then go back to your phone? No one's saying that the phone is wrong or that it's bad. It's just that we need to take our time and reallocate it to better places.
What's your reason for counting something like a podcast or an audiobook as, I mean, I know it's tech, but on the other hand, that seems like it could be sort of a check in versus check out.
Totally. And that's what I mean about like the gauging what an unplugged hour looks like for you. Because I think like, especially because, you know, there are a lot of like long form podcasts that are an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, or listening to an audiobook that's 8 hours. And like, I would say, if you feel like that's nurturing you, it's helping you grow, it's helping you digest information, and you're not going towards other things on your phone or doing other things like, I mean, other than like movement, but like, I would say then that would be unplugged. But if you are resisting the need to be alone with yourself, if you are always in a space where you need noise to be coming at you from every angle, I would challenge it and I would ask myself, like, okay, do I consider this to be unplugged?
Yeah, I do like that because there are times where that space feels so good. I go through phases and I can just feel it on my walks. I'm not distracted on my walks, whether I am listening to an audiobook or just walking in silence, but I'll just feel the pull. And it's probably that space that I get when I'm just with me. And I've like trained myself like Pavlov's dogs to just have my me time. And I'll just feel, no, today is going to be a completely silent walk. And today is going to be an audiobook walk. And it's some of my favorite times. And that's the time I feel really intuitive about the choice. When I'm sitting at home on my couch watching my kids play, I have this major mom guilt of like, I should just be watching them and enjoying how funny it is that they're laughing. And sometimes I do. And then other times it's like, especially with ADD, I just feel like I need to be doing something else. And it doesn't feel good. It's like, if I succumb to it, I can almost, maybe it's the blue light, but I can almost feel like it's like a very mild headache trying to just shoo me away from this activity, but it's so ingrained.
Well, and I don't really know, like, I'm sure more and more science is going to come out on this topic because I've felt the same way where it's like, if I'm sitting on my couch, and I have like a novel that I'm reading, because I'll be honest, like, I don't think that there are many times that I just like sit on my couch and just like watch my daughter play, you know, like I'm sure other parents do that. Maybe I'm missing that part of me, but I'm like, I'm reading a novel or like I write a lot on yellow notepads, like whether I'm doing brain dumps or I'm writing emails or whatever. I like to write longhand, but I feel the difference between doing one of those activities and the way that my daughter is just totally content to be there beside me and she feels like I'm being present with her as opposed to sitting on the couch with my phone. It's a completely different feeling and I don't fully know how to like explain it. But like there's a difference in me and there's a difference in her. And I think it's just because the phones have become so pervasive in everyday life and our kids definitely see it. They definitely know what the devices are. And I think they definitely know that those devices have the capacity to take us and other adults away from them and to take our attention away from them. And I do think that there is like, they're very aware of that. And so it's just interesting when I put the phone away and it's out of reach and I'm just there in the moment with her, even if I am like reading my Kindle or like I am like, you know, I don't know, doing some kind of hobby or something. It feels very different because I know that my attention is with her. And when I have my phone, I'm like keenly aware that my attention is not fully with her.
Yeah. And my brain feels different when I have my Kindle. I have a Kindle Scribe, which I three cheers for that. It's so nice. Like it's the
Mhm.
one where you can actually write notes and stuff like that. It's really awesome. And you can
That's awesome.
not a sponsor, but I just love my Kindle Scribe. But I feel different when I'm on that versus the phone. It's like the phone, I can feel it's like all these like spidey tentacles in my brain, like pulling. Should I check this? Should I just swipe out of this?
Yep.
Oh, no,
Yep.
let me touch it. And my attention in the room is different than that. My child used to say, like there was a period of time where I'd be on my phone and he'd go, "Wake up, mama." And I was like, oh my God, that word choice is like a 2-year-old.
Right?
So on point and also terrifying. Or he'd like slap it out of my hand and I'm like, okay, I gotta get better at this.
Yeah, no, I feel like they know, they can sense it. And like I gave my daughter the language really early to like be able to tell me when to get off of my phone, because I want that to be the gauge. I want her to be the one to tell me if she doesn't feel like I'm being present with her.
And we have no idea what it's like having parents that were on their phones all the time because we just didn't.
We didn't. Yeah.
And so it's heartbreaking. Sometimes I'll come across like a reel that's just like shows like all these people on their phones and their kid like and it's like this is what the childhood you're giving your kid and I'm like, "No, I don't want that to be the case."
Yeah, I know. And that's what's so tough because I really feel like, especially in today's day and age, like we're talking so much about kids and screen time. And I'm like, okay, but like we're the first models of that. And we're either going to be managers of the screen time or we're going to be models. And for me, like I would much rather be a model. And that doesn't mean that I'm perfect, that I always get it right. I think that's a big part of the book. It's like, hey, like you can always try again tomorrow because that pass fail mindset, that overhaul mindset is often the thing that doesn't work. It's the thing that makes us not want to try again, right? It's like when you tell yourself consistently, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this thing, and then you fail after a few days, enough failures, and your brain is not going to want to try anymore. And so I think that's where I'm like, okay, for me, I count the hours and then I know, oh, I can get an hour over here, or I could get an hour over here. And it all adds up and it compounds over time.
What was the trigger for you in coming to realize that you were using your phone as a way to escape uncomfortable emotions?
I honestly don't know if I fully knew that until I was in the midst of the unplugging. I think that when I first started unplugging, I thought this will be a great way to like reclaim time. Like I honestly was like, I'm gonna focus more and get more done. And like, I think I had to come to grips early on in the challenge was like, oh, I place value and worth on myself based on what I'm managing to get done. And that was like a mentality that I was like, oh, this is something that I don't know that I want to carry this with me for the next like 10, 15 years. And so I think that was one of the ways in which I realized like, oh, like I'm using this tool in maybe an unhealthy way. But I think it just was over time in practicing the unplugging, I became aware of why I was grabbing the phone or the correlation between thinking a thought or feeling an emotion and then grabbing my phone because I didn't want to deal with it, or like experiencing boredom, which is just a natural part of life and where imagination and creativity can sprout out of, and me just like reaching for my phone in that. And so it allows you, I think the unplugged hours like allows you to get curious about your rhythms and your routines and why maybe you're reaching for that thing. Or honestly, like if it's not the phone, it might be something else. But like, why am I reaching for this thing to maybe numb me or to maybe make me feel like I don't have to face something that really I should face?
And that's the funny thing about these little default patterns that we create in our lives, sort of unconsciously, is if somebody just sort of said it out of the blue, like, oh, you're grabbing your phone to avoid uncomfortable emotions, I'd be like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm addicted, but No, I'm not. I mean, now this version of me
Yeah.
that's been doing this for this long. But if you told me like 10 years ago, I might disagree or have some resistance of it. But then if you actually start tracking what's happening, if you get super mindful and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, what was happening right now? And that uncomfortable emotion might very well be boredom, but then you go deeper and you ask, well, am I why does boredom bother me? Why can I not be in stillness? And you just start asking yourself questions that might sprout little answers that end up unrolling a whole lot of self-discovery. But
Yeah.
without that space, I think that's one of the biggest things for me is who would you be if you didn't devote thousands of hours to your phone? Because what is that phone really doing? Sure, there are mindful tech and apps that I absolutely love, but really, how often am I just reading someone else's opinion and therefore just programming myself and influencing my thoughts? How much of our actual potential are we just dampening because we aren't allowing ourselves space to create from the inside out, and instead we're just consuming?
No, that's huge. That is huge. And it's something that like came up past the 1,000 hour mark. For me specifically, when people ask me like, hey, like how have the unplugged hours been? Like for a while, I've said like it feels like I'm getting back to the person who was there before all the noise got in. And, over the years with the noise and with the internet connectivity, I've grown, I've developed, I've become a different person. There are parts of me that I would never want to go back to. But then there were other parts of me that were really vibrant pre getting this plugged in. And that looks like, creativity and passion and emotions and hospitality, things like that, that I think over time kind of dimmed or became less vibrant, and I've watched those things be reignited in me. And like in my classes and courses that I teach, I help people establish like healthy rhythms and routines. And one of the things that I prompt people to do is like to make a list of the person that you're becoming, the person that you want to become. And a lot of times when we step back and we make that list, it's not a lot of the things that we've actually been moving towards. It's not about being the most successful person or having the most followers or being the most liked or the biggest audience. It's a lot of times like we want to be like the more present mom. We want to be the joyful person. We want to be the friend that checks in. And a lot of those things, in order to get closer to them and actually become those people, I think would require us to put down our phones more and tune more into our daily lives. But it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But I love how you said it, because I'm like, no, there is a whole other person waiting for you on the other side of this. And this person gets to do so much more with their time because it's not scrolling.
This reminds me of a concept you talk about, which I just love the terminology, tiny forks, and how just these small decisions shape our lives.
Yeah. And I think, I see them every day. I see them in work and I see them in business. And, there was a time like a few months ago where I had a day that I felt like really just too plugged in. And I felt bad. Like I felt bad, like towards my daughter, because I was like, this is not how I want to go about daily life. And at the end of the day, I said to her, like, hey, I'm sorry. I was on my phone too much today. And I said, if you could do one thing in the world tomorrow with mama, what would it be? And her like eyes lit up and she was like, a puzzle. And I'm like, a puzzle? Like a puzzle, it's going to take 15 minutes. It's ordinary. It's like mundane. But in her mind, it's like if I could do anything in the world, it's a puzzle, And so it's like we cleared the space. And that next day, we did a puzzle together, and probably moved into something else. But like, that's what I mean by like that tiny fork. It's like that tiny decision that looks like it doesn't matter because it's not the bigger forks in the road, like the bigger life decisions, but those tiny forks, they add up and they determine whether or not you do show up for your people or you do show up for yourself. Like you get those tiny forks all throughout your day and you get choices.
You said the word mundane, and it reminded me of another concept in your book that I love. You talked about the duty of the moment and how just the importance of focusing on the present task, no matter how mundane. There's an example I've used probably 100 times in this podcast, but I don't even remember where it came from. I think it was Ram Dass, but I just started to like doing the dishes. I used to hate it. And then I started to pretend like, say I just got out of captivity or something crazy after 10 years and I hadn't felt like warm water and like soap. How luxurious would doing the dishes feel? And I started to notice how I could transform these really mundane moments. When you said it right there in context of your daughter wanting to do the puzzle, you said it's very mundane, but to her, something about it is exhilarating. And it makes you wonder, how many things do we think are mundane just because we've been hyping our brains up with so much dopamine from all of these notifications, when it could be super fun, and a previous version of us would have thought it was fun, but now we've made 90% of our lives mundane.
It's so true. It's so true because we are hyping up our brains with all that dopamine. So it's like, it's the same thing. Like if you're going to have a diet of like sugars and fats and salty foods and all this stuff, like your body is going to come to crave that. Your taste buds are going to come to crave that. But like to be like nourished by like a plate of vegetables or a salad, like over time, you feel so much better because of those decisions and your body really thanks you. But if your palate is not trained for that, you don't want that necessarily. And I think that that's the case with a lot of the like quote unquote mundane things in our lives, is that it's like, there's a cheaper, faster form of dopamine over here that in the moment makes us feel really good, even though it actually like jacks up our emotions and like changes the way that we think. Like in the moment, it's so addicting and so alluring. And that's why I think like when given the choice between like screens and like imaginary play, a lot of times like kids want to opt for the screen. The screen is the easier option. There's resistance to the imaginary play. But when they got into it, you start to see like, whoa, like they're creative, they're artistic. This is shaping their personality. It's shaping their being, you know? And so it's asking ourselves that same question of like, what are the things that are shaping my being and shaping my character? Is this a good path that I'm walking on? Or do I want to reassign myself to, like you said, the duty of the moment? It may not always be the fireworks. It may not always be big or sexy or whatever. But like, what would it look like to be in that moment fully and then move to the next thing and then move to the next thing? And what you're doing, as crazy as it sounds, is like, it's not just the duty of the moment. Like you're building a life. That's what you're doing. Moment by moment, you are building a life.
I found that if you don't give someone something else to do, especially if their brains are used to being so overstimulated, it can be, they just feel a little bit lost. And so I love how you talk about finding God in daily tasks. This is something that I've been focusing on in the last couple of years, and just in a way of discovery, where I've been sort of asking myself, like, what would that mean to me? How would that feel? You also talk about this idea of praying unceasingly. And a couple years ago, I started going through A Course in Miracles, and it just talks about that. And they talk about this idea of thinking with God. And it's as simple as kind of putting your intention to like, okay, drop my will and what's the higher version of that, or however people sort of relate to God or visualize it. How do you think about that?
You know, I think that my relationship with God has changed so much through the unplugged hours. And that's because I think that maybe God was trying to communicate with me all along, but he didn't have to compete with the levels of noise that I allowed into my brain and into my mind and into my day. And so when I turned down the noise, I feel like I can hear him more readily. I can hear him speaking into parts of my day. I can, experience great ideas or great epiphanies. And I can naturally feel like, oh, like God is in that moment with me, or like maybe God dropped that into my spirit. And so it's like I feel like my mind and my faith, like hand in hand, have become so much more vibrant by hushing out and clearing out the noise, because it's like, oh, I actually like being in my mind. I'm not afraid to sit still with myself. And one of the ways that I've seen it play out, like practicing stillness, is like in my, what I call like my morning meeting, where it's like I used to just designate that time for like prayer or for study or whatever that looked like. But what I've started doing is like, like figuring out what my task list is for the day, looking at my calendar and inviting God into those things as well. Because like maybe I made my list for the day, but how do I know there's not something that hasn't even made the list yet that is going to be far and above more important than whatever I thought needed to get done? And how am I supposed to know that if I never just sit and listen to whatever is going to drop into my spirit? Because I've seen it happen dozens and dozens and dozens of times where like, just a few weeks ago, I was sitting in my morning meeting and I felt like I was supposed to like reach out to a friend and just like say, thank you, I love you. Like, I'm so thankful for your friendship. And of course, like, I think when those things happen, there's a little bit of resistance, like, oh, I don't really feel like doing it. Or like, maybe, it doesn't matter or whatever. I don't know why the resistance comes in, but it always does. But I sat there and I sent the text after the morning meeting was over. And my friend responded back to me and she was like, oh my gosh, like, I got your text as I was stepping into the doctor's office for the first time to confirm a pregnancy after pregnancy loss. And in that moment, getting that text from you, I felt like God was with me. I felt like that was God saying, like, I'm here with you. And I'm over here on this side of things being like, I don't know if I should send the text, but I sat and I listened and I heard that I should send it. And when I followed through, like, look what God did, And so it's like, I want to make spaces in my day consistently to hear God's voice, because it always sounds like love and it always ushers me to something that matters far more than whatever I've put on the list for myself.
That was one of the reasons why I switched from guided meditations to silent meditations. I still love guided meditations sometimes, but I primarily do silent. And it's because that's where I'm truly making space for someone else's voice to come through, not just the person who recorded the meditation.
Yeah, totally.
I love this story that you tell too about an older woman named Maggie. Sometimes I get pangs of jealousy. For some reason, my grandparents are just, they are wise in a way of being, but they're not the kind of wise that are going to like share something where I'm like, I got to remember that. Like my husband will have certain things from his dad, who's almost my grandparents' age. And it'll be these little one-liners that are sometimes like so profound. And I'm like, Nanny, Poppy, snap to it. Like start reading Alan Watts or something. I need something from you. But like, they've just sort of kind of adapted with the times. They're on their iPads all the time. But like I said, they do have a wisdom way of being where they're just so accepting. They don't try to force anybody to be anything, where a lot of people in my family are like that. But anyways, point is, tell us the Maggie story.
Yeah, Maggie, I was a junior in college when this happened, which is like, oh my gosh, so long ago. But I was doing like a community service day in college. And I remember we went to a senior citizen center and we ended up like sitting in the lobby and like playing cards with a bunch of older women. And the woman at the table that was kind of like ruling the roost, her name was Maggie. And I had this interaction with her where I remember that like my phone buzzed somebody was texting me and I was trying to answer them back under the table. And she like called me out on it, like completely was just like, I don't understand you and your generation. And like my granddaughters, like they are always texting somebody, they're always on the phone with their friends. And like, I want to be like, that's not a friend. Like you need to be able to see your friend. You need to be able to smell your friend. Like you need to be beside your friend. And like looking back on it, like would Maggie in 2024 probably say the same things? I'm not really sure. I don't really know because like, yes, I know that like the people that I am texting are indeed my friends, but I understood what she was saying in that sense of just like, you don't need to just communicate all the time with people on the screen. Like you need to be with your people. You need to be face to face with them. And here I had an opportunity to be completely present where I was. And I wasn't necessarily like taking it, you know, because I think at the time when she said that, I kind of was like, yeah, okay, whatever, you know, like I'm a 21-year-old. I know what I'm doing. But that conversation has just like rung in my mind ever since then of like, okay, what would Maggie do in this situation? Or what would Maggie say in this situation as we have become more and more digitally connected, where it's like, yeah, some of our best relationships are happening on a screen. And is that necessarily a good thing? Or, you know, what are some ways that we can come out from behind the screen and like be with one another face to face, like fully present?
It really makes me think, especially with the science on the electromagnetic fields of humans. Like our energy expands 20 feet beyond our body. Well, if we're in a vital state. And it affects us in ways that we'll never actually comprehend. There's the science of brains communicating without speaking. There's our cycles syncing. And the problem with the technology relationships is, on one hand, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, well, I'm more connected than ever. Like I can talk to my friend in Texas way more than I'd be able to do otherwise. So there's a lot of benefits to it. But there's the temptation of maintaining that relationship behind the screen, or you have a less of a pull. Like I need to go out and see somebody because you don't think that you're isolated. But we know that connection is one of the most important things. We know that we don't get the depth of that connection via text or even a phone call. Yeah. And so how much are we really losing? And what parts of that do we even not comprehend and not really fully know because we haven't gotten there in studying how actually mixing our auric fields changes our lives?
Yeah, you know, I feel like we're just at the cusp of where the research is going to go over the years with tech. Like we are literally just at the place where like the wet paint from the last decade is like finally drying. And what we're seeing is that it's not good. It's not good. Like tech is not making us better people, like maybe more efficient people, like maybe, yes, like medical advances and all of this stuff that we would never want to take away. But like we as human beings are designed for one another. We are not designed for these tech-based relationships. And it's like, that's where I have to constantly remind myself, like, hey, like tech is a tool and it can be a beautiful tool, but like you have to use the tools rather than letting the tools use you. And like, I can love the fact that my mom, who's 1,000 miles away, we can FaceTime with her and we can see her. That's beautiful. 15 years ago, didn't necessarily have that. At the same time, like I want to be the friend that shows up at the door for my friends. I want to be able to like sit across from somebody at a restaurant and be completely present in that moment, because I think that there's so much beauty and importance in that. But like the research is showing that the more that we are on tech and interacting on tech, the less that we are valuing and the less that we are craving in-person connections, which to me is like really scary data, because we're also very lonely and we're very anxious. And I'm like, it does not take a rocket scientist to see the correlation between these things.
While you were talking, it's like my personality voice, my ego voice, my small self, as Paul Selig calls it, when you said, I want to be the friend that shows up on somebody's door, I thought, oh, that's my nightmare. Please just don't show up. And then I thought, but would I be that person if technology wasn't so ingrained? I'd actually probably welcome it. But instead, we put these shells around us and we think, oh no, this is great because this way I don't have to. Not thinking, well, maybe we are only this person who wants to hermit so much. And I know some people like that more than others. I feel like I'm somebody who likes that a lot. But again, would I like that a lot if there wasn't for technology? How much of it is my addiction that's driving that versus my higher self or what's actually good for me?
Yeah.
And you can never really, I always said this, with a particular medication I used to take for ADHD. There's a cult following. I was one of those people, but I remember saying like, well, it's funny because if you would have asked me even on year 9 of taking this, I would have said it's the best thing ever. It's changing my life. A year after getting off of it and detoxing from it, I could actually honestly look at all of the negative side effects. And I think we're that way with technology.
Totally. It's totally true. And I think especially like having gone through COVID as adults is a whole other level of it, because for a time and season, that was a very long time and season, we needed our phones to be our lifelines. We needed our phones to stay connected. That was our means of communication with one another. And I know me, like when, the world opened back up and we started meeting again, there was definitely a resistance in my spirit of like, oh no, I don't want to do this. I want to stay at home. I want to stay in my house, but like, it's also me knowing like, no, but I need people and I need to be uncomfortable and I need to be in physical spaces with people. But it's true what you're saying. It's like a lot of times, like we don't actually know what we need or what we want. And I think that's because a lot of times too, we're looking to the phones to tell us what we need and what we want. Like if I'm constantly scrolling, whatever pops up for that social media influencer that inspires me, I'm going to rightfully assume that's what I need and what I want is whatever that person is offering me. But if we were to get into the quiet spaces and into the stillness, we might find out that it's not that, and that thing is not going to fill us, but like it's different for you than it is for me. And like, I remember it's such a seemingly small example, but like, before I started unplugging, like I was always so busy. And I wore busy like a badge of honor, it was like, I want people to know I'm busy. I want to be the busy person. Like when people ask me how I'm doing, I'm busy, and it felt like that was like an achievement for me. But I also saw this correlation between if something were coming up, be it a party or a gathering or something around the holidays or a birthday party, I was always the one that was like last minute frazzled, stopping at Target to grab the gift in the gift bag and throw it in and then go to the place or whatever. And I always was like aware, as small as that is, I always remember thinking, this isn't how I want to be. I don't want to feel this frantic that like when it's time to go somewhere, I just have to like throw it all together, like grab something from the grocery store because I didn't have time to prepare a dish and like show up at the place because I'm too busy. And now on the other side of like unplugging consistently, I'm like, oh, I put so much more intention into the places that we're going, into the meals that we're preparing, into a birthday party coming up. And like, I order the gift far in advance and I wrap it and it's ready to go for that day. And it's funny because it's such a small shift, but for me it feels like, oh, this is me showing up as the person that I said I wanted to be. I didn't want to be frazzled. I didn't want to be hurried. That was a side effect of the busy that I lived by. And I think technology was something that was spurring that on in me. It was like, well, what was I so busy doing? Oh, checking this, doing this, getting this off the list. And as long as I am just attuned to what is on my phone or what is on my devices, yeah, there's always going to be another thing I could do. There's always going to be another thing I could do to get ahead. And like, I had to get to the space where I could say like, enough is enough. Like, no, like I'm saying no to this thing to say yes to this other thing. And like, maybe this other thing is not something the world will ever see or care about. No one's going to care that I prepared a dish for a holiday party. But like, maybe they will. Maybe the people that are in that room, maybe it will matter to them. And maybe I don't document it, and that's okay because maybe it's enough that it matters to me.
So much of this conversation is going back to allowing ourselves the space to become, which not a lot of us do. And we wonder why our lives turn out a certain way, but we've just, like we talked about, have been consuming everybody else's opinions, what we should do, whatever fear mongering is going on. And then we just take the next action kind of mindlessly, and we don't know who we are. I
Yeah.
went working with a ton of people to figure that out. And a lot of people are between 40 and 50, and they're just like, I have lost myself. I don't know what my real desires are. I don't know what direction I'm moving toward. And this reminds me of a concept that you talk about, purpose anxiety. And it ends up hitting people even more because they're simultaneously hit with kind of just walking through life and not realizing how distracted they are. And then also all of these messages while they're scrolling about having this big purpose that they need to change the world with. When really it's more about, in my view, just really getting in tune with yourself, what your real desires are, not what you think your desires should be, what you actually want to spend your time on, what you actually want to do and be, rather than all of the things that you're flooded with, keeping up with the Joneses, and then aligning your life with these small little things closer to those true desires. And that's when you feel purposeful and fulfilled in your life.
It's so true. And you're right. Like the messaging, it's so pervasive. And so you go online and then you see 1,000,001 things that you could be and all the ways that you could hustle towards it and all the new side ventures that you could have. And it ultimately takes you off of the clear path. And I think the clear path, like you said, is like getting wildly present to your life to figure out what you bring to the table, to figure out what the people around you need. And I'm like, I think about like all of the books that I've written and the things that I've created. And I'm like, all of them came as a result of me being present in my life long enough to see, oh, this is the need that I want to fill in this season. But if we're not present to our lives, we can never actually step into that. But like, I don't know, like I think it feels so much more to be walking in the path of like your true self and like what you said you wanted to do. And if you don't know, I would say like take some time, take a breather, turn the phone off, light a candle, take an hour or two, and like, I don't know, pull out old magazines. That's how I make my vision boards, and just go through, pull out things that strike you. Like just do it offline, dare to dream, dare to make space to dream and enlarge your vision, and then start to follow down that path, like small habits at a time, as opposed to going online thinking it's going to fill some hole, which it won't, or thinking that it's going to give you the idea for what you need to do next, which it probably won't.
You talk about considering the story that we're telling our children about technology.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought of that. What is the story that you've come to that you share with your daughter?
You know, I think the reason maybe I think about it so much is because like I was raised by a mom who was so present with me. She is like one of the most present people that you will ever meet. And even though like when I was raised, you know, like we didn't have cell phones and this and that, but like still I could feel her presence, and I knew that when she was with me, she was with me. And it made me feel like I was capable. It made me feel like I could do whatever I set my mind to or my heart to. And like I want to tell that same story to my daughter, you know, like a story of like, I just think that sometimes like the power of people's presence is the catalyst. I think about like the people in my life that like believed in me and made me feel like I could go and do whatever I set my mind to. And I'm like, those are people that were present with me. Those are people that sat across the table with me. Those are people that like sat on the couch with me, and like we shared stories together. We shared time together. And like, I always want to have that space for my daughter, you know, and for whoever I am with. I want them to feel like, oh, I have her full attention. She's with me. Like that to me is like the greatest compliment in the world. If somebody tells me, oh, like you're really present, like I really sense that like you're with me. I think that like that's the most important story that I want to tell as much as I can, whenever I can, however I can.
One of my favorite quotes of all time is Alan Watts, who says, this is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you're doing in the here and now, and instead of calling it work, realize it's play. And I love that. I think about it with the dishwashing example I gave, but I also think about it in the level of presence. I get a lot of compliments when I do podcast interviews where people just say, it's amazing how you can somehow think of your story and think of the next question and be constantly weaving it in. And it's something I've learned over time. And I think that's what's so beautiful about dedicating so much time to something, that you start to really feel the mastery, because it's kind of like, say you get into art and first, like Austin Kleon calls it steal like an artist, where he says like, when you're first starting art, you're just copying. Then you get comfortable enough that you start to develop your own style. But I think the same thing can be said for any moment where first you're trying, but when you can actually release trying, and this is true in things like meditation, then you reach this other level of deep. And so after a few years of interviews, I wasn't so nervous about the interview and keeping up and whatever. And so it's like I can click in where I'm like, okay, well, I'm just doing an interview. Or what's it like if I become this moment? What's it like if I open my energy to become a new entity that also involves you, the person that I'm talking to? And it's like it clicks something and inspiration just flows. And I don't think a lot of people find that level of presence in their regular lives, unless you're like a writer or an athlete of some sort, because that's that's flow that can be found in anything.
Yeah, no, you're so right. That flow can be found in anything. And it's hard. Like I don't feel like I always get it right, but like I don't know, like I think that like you can feel the difference between the days and the moments when you are feeling like you're completely present, and when you're not, when you're disconnected, when you're trying to do a bunch of things at once, when you're just moving from the next thing to the next thing. And so that's kind of like why I like tracking my unplugged hours, and why an hour is such a benchmark time for me, I think, in like daily life. It's like, oh, just take it hour by hour. When it feels like too much, take it hour by hour. And that feels like enough of a space of time that I can embody and be fully intentional with it.
So say someone wants to embark on this 1,000 hour challenge.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought of was, well, what app am I going to track those hours? How do you track it?
You can track it with a paper tracker. I literally have free paper trackers online on my website. And I mean, I would recommend that more than anything. There is a lot of tech options out there, and like those can be beautiful in their own right. But I personally am like, you know what? I'm going to print out a paper tracker, and then hour by hour, I mark it off just with like a pen or a highlighter. And it, you know, it doesn't have to be advanced. It doesn't have to be a meticulous app. I think sometimes we just need to be willing to like get back to like old school, you know, just like pen to paper.
Well, if you were to leave listeners with one piece of growth work for this week, whether it's something to think about or actually starting on this 1,000 hours challenge, what would it be?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a good question. I feel like there's so many like avenues that I could take it in. I would go back to like what I was saying earlier, like not even the unplugging. Like I hope that that comes, and it will come by way of the suggestion. But if you can, I would clear the space sometime in this week. It doesn't have to be a long time, but like clear the space to like turn down the noise, turn off the distractions. And like we were talking about earlier, just like give yourself the space of like an hour or two to just dream, just to ask yourself, what do I want, or who do I want to become, or like, am I going in the direction that I want to be going in? I just don't think we take that time apart from like New Year's to really think about it, you know? And it's like, well, today is a good day to start, and then to look at what you write down and what you dream up and start to ask yourself the questions of like, okay, like, and how would I get from point A to point B? Are there small things that I can do within this week that are going to make me feel like I'm becoming that version of myself, whether that's a more present person or a more joyful person or a more intentional person? There are going to be action steps to get you from point A to B, but a lot of times it requires like tuning out the noise long enough to hear yourself speak.
Well, thank you so much. I needed a re-inspiration on the unplugging right now. I've been thinking about it a lot, so this came at the perfect time for me, and I'm sure most of us are thinking about it a lot because I don't know one person who doesn't struggle with it. So for listeners that are interested in getting your book Unplugged or connecting with you or finding some of those resources, where's the best place for them to connect?
They can go to hannahbrencher.com or Hannah Brencher on any social media platform. The book is called The Unplugged Hours, and it is available in bookstores, retailers, Amazon, wherever books are sold.
All the links for this episode are at mindlove.com/367. Your challenge for this week is, do you want to go for 1,000 hours tech-free? What about even just 10? Pick a number. You got to start somewhere. And if you start checking things off and you can really feel into how good it feels and how you feel, that is when change becomes sustainable. But we have to bring our awareness to the positive effects, even if it is just checking off that box. Hannah Brencher has a printable on her website, so check that out. But I want to know how it goes. And this sounds so silly to say, but reach out to me on Instagram and let me know. But do it during one of your tech hours. I will be following along. We are dealing with many emergencies here. It's wild. I have to do an entire episode on just how my last week has been. Hands down, the craziest week of my life. And you guys know my stories, so there's some things to catch you guys up on. But then I will do my 1,000 hours tech-free, because right now I have to stay connected. But again, let me know how it goes. All of my fabulous sponsors are at mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
At Audi Columbus, luxury meets convenience. Family owned since 1897, we've built our reputation on trust, transparency, and innovation. Browse our selection online and complete your purchase from home. Then simply stop by to pick up your keys.
Right now, drive home a new 2025 Audi Q5 for $699 for 36 months with $4,405 down.
The next generation shops online. Experience the future with us at AudiColumbus.com. Buyers Auto, driving the next generation of buyers.
See dealer for details. Offer ends 7/30/25.